Okay, it's been a little while since we did a phone unboxing, but today we have got the Vernee Mix 2. Let's open it up and have a look inside. But before we start, I should say that this review sample was provided free of charge by GearBest. That does not influence my views on this product. My review opinions are my own, and I won't be bought by free samples. There will be links in the video description below to buy this on GearBest. Those are affiliate links, which means if you click and buy that way, I make a small profit. If you object to that idea, please just Google this up and don't use my links. Anyway, on with the unboxing. So let's have a look and see what we get in the box. So it's an interestingly slim package we've got here. Sort of flattish square box. So the phone's in there. We'll set that aside for one moment. And then underneath this partition, we've got a Euro adapter brick. It's quite a hefty one actually. I wonder if that's like a fast charging. We'll have a look at the spec on that in a minute, and I'll put that up on the screen. There is a USB type C, I believe. Let's have a look and just check that is USB-C. No, that's micro USB. There's a micro USB cable. I thought that was USB-C, but that's actually micro USB. There is a screen protector, another screen protector, the SIM tool, a little instruction, warranty card and instructions, and a flexible transparent case, which is nice. Got quite interesting little ruggedized type corners there, which is quite pleasant. Anyway, so that's that. Let's have a look at the phone itself. So the phone itself is the kind of slab type of phone. It's very rectangular. It's got an interesting grippy feel on the edges there. That's nice. Let's just have a look around. So we'll peel this off. I think that's it. That's leaving a screen protector on there. Yeah, there's a factory fitted screen protector, which I'll leave on there, even though I don't really like them very much, but I know people do. So then on the back, we've got this other film, which is going to have to be peeled off. So that's got details about the features. But let's peel this off and then we can have a look at the phone in its natural state. Okay, so let's look around and see what we've got. So on this edge we've got the SIM tray, nothing else. On the top there we've got a headphone jack. I know some people will be pleased to see that. On the right hand side we've got volume rocker buttons and on off. They're quite slim little buttons there. They don't protrude as much as I've seen on some other devices. And then on the bottom we've got the double speaker grill and the micro USB. And then we can just see at the top here there's the speaker grill, very very slim up the top there, and we can see a sensor there. That's probably a proximity and light sensor. And then down at the bottom we've got the front facing camera, and on the back here dual cameras, single flash. As you can see it's a fingerprint magnet, but that's to be expected with this style of phone. And we've got the fingerprint sensor. So fingerprint sensor, dual camera and single flash. Now it'll be interesting to see if the dual camera makes any difference on this phone. We've seen it on other phones and it didn't really make any difference at all, apart from this spurious blur mode, which was not very impressive on some of the other phones. Anyway, let's have a look at this one. Before we go any further, I'm just going to compare it to, this is the Maze Alpha. So what we saw early in 2017 was these 16:9 minimal bezel phones with screens that are quite broad. Then later in 2017 we saw a flush of these 18:9 minimal bezel phones, and this is an example of one of those. So this is a taller, slimmer phone, which is going to suit some people more than others. There's not very much media actually being broadcast in 18:9 at the moment, so watching videos on there you're still going to have black bars at the side. You might find that some games will adapt to that, and some video content probably will start to adapt to that. But I find personally reading emails and web pages on a slightly wider screen is better, but it's very much a personal preference. Anyway, let's power it on and see what we get. Okay, so now we can really see how much of the screen is screen and how much is bezel. Now it has these rounded corners. I don't know whether that's actually a truly rounded screen or whether that's a software thing where it's just turned off some pixels at the corners there. There's quite a bezel, so let's just make note of that. So at the top here we've got probably 5mm of bezel between the outer edge of the case and the top of the screen. At the sides we've got maybe 3mm, and then at the bottom we've got this chin here which is, I don't know, probably 12mm. So there's a fair bit of bezel all the way around, although it does come across as a phone that has quite a lot of screen, so that's good. So I'm going to go through the setup and then we'll have a little play with it and see what it's like. Okay, so we're going to just add a fingerprint, so we'll get a chance to see how good this fingerprint sensor is. Well, my finger has found it okay on the back of the phone, which is always good news. It does seem reasonably responsive. I'll add another one. I'll do my right index finger. I'm not the hugest fan of fingerprint sensors on the back of the phone, just because they're difficult to use if you're using the phone flat on a desk. But again, it's very much a matter of personal preference. That some people will much prefer it and will be using the thing handheld nearly all the time. Okay, so now we're into the desktop. So it looks like a fairly standard setup. It's got some interesting transitions. It does look like relatively standard Android 7.0. So back in a moment with some more views on what it's actually like to use this thing. So one thing I know people are always interested in is the fingerprint unlock. So let's have a look and see. Yeah, that actually seems pretty swift. There's maybe 1/10 of a second there. Not the fastest I've seen, but pretty acceptable. And seems pretty reliable. So fingerprint sensor seems okay. It's about right placement, I think, for something like that. So when you pick it up, your finger does naturally fall on it. So I took the phone off to my usual location for shooting video and I did some tests. So here's how that went. So this is my usual video subjects here. Let's go in nice and close and see if we get a refocus. I did some other daytime video indoors in diffuse natural light, and colour rendition and focus was acceptable. There was some hunting for focus, but it seemed generally stable. One thing I did notice, and you'll hear it in this next little clip now, is that sometimes the focus mechanism was audible in the recorded video. So I went and did some nighttime video in my usual location. Now there is a bit more light than usual here because it's Christmas and the illuminations are up. The phone did struggle. It bravely carried on trying to get an acceptable image in low light. It did that by reducing the frame rate, which introduced some blurring and some loss of definition. But it is a low light situation, so it's always a bit of a compromise. Still photos seemed acceptably sharp and the colour rendition seemed pretty good. Focus was quite easy to manage, pretty much conformed to what I would have expected for a phone of this standard. The one thing to say on this is that the camera itself, the camera app is the same very basic camera app that we've seen on a lot of budget smartphones, and it has just these video, photo, face beauty, blur, mono, panorama and pro modes, where you've got a few more controls. And just to say that the blur mode on here is just the usual fake bokeh that we've seen on all of the other budget smartphones. It just applies an oval blur mask to the image. It does actually report an error if you cover up one of the cameras, so it is in some way using the dual camera. But honestly, this fake bokeh mode that you get from this, you could just do that in software with a single camera. So it's a bit of a waste of time really, the dual cameras on here. I don't actually see that adding dual cameras to this phone has really added any value. So let's have a little roundup of the good and bad features of this phone, or at least the features I thought were good and bad on this phone. So on the good features, the phone itself feels really solid. It's got this interesting little chamfer on the edge of the body here, which actually makes it nice and easy to grip. And the form factor, this narrower form factor, also makes it quite easy to grip, especially when you're using the phone as a camera. It's not so likely to yaw and roll in your hand, and so you can get more stable video holding a phone like this than something that's maybe wider or generally bigger or heavier. The screen is nice and clear and bright and sharp. The version of Android on here seems pretty unadorned, so it's just very, very standard, which is great. It seems to have a good general feature set. It's got all of the right sensors that you'd want. It's got a headphone jack. It's got a status LED indicator, which not all budget phones have. And it's got a fingerprint sensor. The features I thought were perhaps not quite so good. So the micro USB instead of USB-C, that's a bit of a shame actually. There's really no excuse for having micro USB on a phone now. It should be USB-C all the way. The bezels. Oh, I hate having to say this, but I'm going to say it every time it happens really with these budget phones. The bezels are bigger than the images in the marketing information on the websites. So it is a minimal bezel phone, but the bezels are not as slim as they're advertised to be, and that really annoys me. And the dual camera is just a bit of a waste of time. So the features that are essentially neutral, but you might care one way or another about. So the placement of the fingerprint scanner, you might care about where that fingerprint scanner is placed. I certainly do. You may not. I don't particularly like it on the back. You may prefer it on the back, but it is on the back. The shape of the screen itself, the 18:9 aspect ratio, is something you may like or dislike. I'm in two minds about it. I like the shape of the phone, but I find a narrow screen like this is not ideal for reading web pages and emails. And you can put it in landscape mode, but then you're scrolling a lot. So I always find a 16:9 screen a bit more optimal than an 18:9 screen like this, but that is very much a personal preference. And the rounded screen corners. Let's see if we can have a look at that. When we look at the corner of the screen there, we've got that rounded screen corner effect there, which I believe is just software. I don't think the screen itself is actually rounded or masked off there. I think that is just pixels turned off. You're either going to like that or dislike it. I guess actually you might not even care, but I find it just a little bit annoying actually. I just prefer screens to be the shape they are rather than something masked off just to have a style. So that is about it for now. As you know, what will happen now is we'll use this phone for a week and we'll come back with a week's worth of hands-on real-world experimentation with this phone, and we'll have some proper views on what it's like, including battery life and anything else that crops up during that week's testing. So if there's anything in particular you want me to try to test during that week, then please leave a comment below and ask for it, and we'll see if we can fit that in the follow-up video in a week's time. So I hope that's been useful. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.